I never planned to stay.
Circle,
I
Brandon.
told myself I was only trading a pot of stew for a roof. Nothing more. Nothing holy. By nightfall, the ranch yard was already burning. In the wind, a woman stood between a woodpile on fire and a door she refused to open, a baby pressed to her shoulder, a kettle singing on the stove like a warning. Men shouted. Hooves cut the mud. Somewhere beyond the smoke, a paper with a seal meant to steal a life was changing hands. The rancher could have signed. He could have walked away with less blood and more land. Instead, he chose to lose cattle, choose truth, and keep a child who did not legally belong to anyone. By winter, snow would soften the fences, a blue stone would rest on a woman's hand, and laughter would be asked for as payment instead of rent. But that night, when the fire died and the baby slept, one detail did not fit. The ledger page meant to burn was missing. Stay with this story to the very end. Subscribe for more Western love tales. And tell me, what city are you watching from? The supply wagon lurched to a stop so hard, the two old carpet bags slid and thudded against the plank floor. Evelyn Hart caught the smaller one before it toppled, then tightened her arms around the bundled weight at her chest. The baby gave a thin, offended cry and buried his face in her coat as the wind knifed through the gap between her collar and her throat. The driver spat over the side. Circle brand. That's your gate. Ahead, a wooden crossbeam cut the sky, charred at the edges, the ranch mark burned into it like a warning. Beyond it, the land rolled away in pale grass and low winter light. A church bell would have sounded kinder than that gate. Evelyn slid down from the wagon. Her boots hit frozen ground that crunched like sugar. She did not look back toward town. If she looked back, she might start counting what she no longer had. I used to think knowledge could keep a person safe. The baby squirmed, then stilled when she pressed her palm between his shoulders and breathed warm into his cap. She had learned to quiet him with the smallest things: pressure, rhythm, a whispered hymn swallowed by wind. A figure moved by the fence line, tall, broad-shouldered, the kind of man the prairie seemed to make without asking permission. He approached at a steady pace, not hurried, not hesitant. His hat brim kept his eyes in shadow until he reached the gatepost and stopped close enough that Evelyn caught the scent of leather and cold iron. "Ma'am," the driver called, already eager to be gone. "That's him." The man's gaze went first to the baby, then to Evelyn's hands, too smooth for ranch work, the nails broken short anyway. He looked past her to the carpet bags like he was weighing their contents in his mind. "You the one from the advertisement?" he asked. Evelyn did not reach for the paper in her pocket. Not yet. She kept the baby between herself and the wind and said, "Yes, sir. Can you cook?" "I can learn fast." He didn't smile. That ranch kitchen isn't a schoolhouse. Evelyn felt the baby's breath against her skin, small and uneven. She chose her words the way she once chose proofs. No wasted motion, no weakness offered for free. "I'm not asking for comfort," she said. "Only shelter. I'll earn it." The man's thumb hooked in his belt. For a beat, the only sound was the leather creak of the harness and the baby's soft hiccup. "How far you figure you can make it if I say no?" he asked. Evelyn lifted her chin. "Not far enough." Something in that answer settled. Not kindness, something harder. A rule deciding to hold. He turned his head toward the driver. "Pete, bags in the kitchen." The driver exhaled like he'd been holding his breath and climbed down to haul the carpet bags. Evelyn didn't move until the man looked back at her. 1 week, he said. You get a week to prove you're useful. If you aren't, Pete takes you back when he brings supplies again. Yes, sir. Her voice didn't shake. She did not allow it. His eyes flicked to the baby again. And the boy? Evelyn's arms tightened. He stays with me. The man's mouth compressed, as if he didn't like complications but had lived with them long enough to know they came anyway. After dark, you keep to the house, he said. You eat in the kitchen. You don't wander. The men here are good men, but they're cowboys. They curse. They don't think. They get lonely. Evelyn nodded once. Clear. He stepped aside from the gate and swung it open with a shove. The hinge groaned like an old grievance. Come on, he said, and started walking as if she already belonged behind him. The ranch buildings rose from a shallow bowl of land. Log house, barn, corrals. A low bunkhouse crouched against wind. No curtains. No smoke curling pretty from a chimney. The place looked like it had been built for work, not for living. Pete carried the carpet bags through the back door, leaving a trail of dust and melted frost. Evelyn followed, her breath clouding in front of her. The kitchen hit her like a wall. A massive cast-iron stove squatted along one side, black, scarred, and silent. A water barrel sat beside it, half full. A wood box sat beside that, almost empty. Pots hung from nails. A pantry door stood ajar, revealing flour sacks and beans and onions like a modest confession. This beast'll bite you if you treat it gentle, the man said, crossing to the stove and tapping the iron with 2 knuckles. The sound was dull, as if it swallowed light. He pointed without ceremony. Water there. Firewood out back. Root cellar behind the house. Smokehouse to the left. Breakfast at 5. Dinner at 6. Evelyn shifted the baby on her hip, eyes scanning the room the way she once scanned a page for hidden errors. She saw soot on the stovepipe, a scorch mark on the floor where something had boiled over in anger, a stack of plates worn thin by years of men eating fast. The man reached into his vest and drew out a pocket watch. It flashed dull gold in the window light. You've got 4 hours, he said, snapping it open. I want a hot dinner on the table for 15 men. Evelyn's throat tightened before she could stop it. 4 hours would have been enough time to recite a sermon, to write a letter, to pack a trunk. 4 hours to feed 15 hungry cowboys on a stove she'd never touched was a different kind of test. Yes, sir, she said anyway. He closed the watch, and just before he turned away, his gaze landed on her face like a weight. One more thing, he said. Evelyn waited. This place has been quiet, he said, as if the word embarrassed him. The last few cooks brought meals like funerals. It settles in the bones, makes men mean. He paused, and for the first time his voice softened, not with tenderness but with something like tired honesty. Can you cook with laughter, Miss? Evelyn realized he hadn't asked her name until now. Her lips felt numb from cold. Hart, she said. Evelyn Hart. He nodded once, filing it away. Can you cook with laughter, Miss Hart? He repeated. Evelyn glanced down at the baby. His eyelids drooped, lashes pale against his cheek, trusting her without knowing why. She swallowed. "I can try," she said. The man studied her as if he could tell the difference between trying and pretending. Then he turned and walked out, leaving her alone with the stove, the barrel, the dwindling wood, and a promise she'd already spent. Evelyn set the baby down in the carpet bag for a heartbeat, just long enough to free her hands, and pulled a small cloth wallet from her coat pocket. The advertisement inside was folded so many times the creases had nearly cut through. Ink, cheap paper, a lifeline that smelled faintly of smoke. She smoothed it once, then tucked it away like a prayer. "Lord," she murmured, and the word came out before she could weigh it. "Help me not shame myself today." Then she tied an apron around her waist, pushed kindling into the firebox, and struck a match. The flame trembled. So did her hands. She forced both to steady. She chose stew because stew forgave. Meat, water, onions, potatoes. Things that could hide their rough edges if you gave them time and heat. But the iron pot, once she filled it, was too heavy for her to lift without sloshing. She had to ladle water 1 cup at a time, jaw clenched, as if she could will strength into her arms by refusing to complain. The stove fought her. Too much wood, and it roared until the pot boiled over. Too little, and it sulked, the stew sitting there like cold mud. She blistered her fingers on the damper. She chopped vegetables with a dull knife that turned clean cuts into bruises. The baby woke and cried, and she rocked him with her hip while stirring with her right hand, whispering half-remembered lines of a Christmas hymn. Outside, the afternoon light began to thin. When the dinner bell clanged, an iron bell mounted on a post by the kitchen door, Evelyn's heart jumped like a startled horse. Boots thudded on boards. Voices rose. Chairs scraped. 15 men filed in and took seats as if the table belonged to hunger more than to anyone else. They nodded to her, one by one, hats in hand. "Ma'am." "Evenin', ma'am." Evelyn stood at the end of the table, shoulders squared, spoon in hand, like a weapon she didn't know how to use. She served bowls of stew that steamed but did not shine. She set down biscuits that looked respectable on top and hid their burnt bottoms like sins. The rancher entered last. He took the chair at the head of the table and didn't touch his spoon right away. His eyes moved over the meal, then rose to meet hers. No praise, no mercy. Just assessment. The men ate. Quiet at first. Then a few murmured approvals. Not loud, but real. "Hot," one said, like it was a blessing. Evelyn let out the smallest breath. The rancher tasted the stew, chewed once, twice, set his spoon down. "Under-seasoned," he said, voice low enough not to humiliate her, sharp enough to cut clean. He picked up a biscuit, broke it, and glanced at the bottom. Heavy. Evelyn's cheeks warmed. She kept her gaze steady. "And the coffee," he added, lifting his cup. He took a sip, and his eyes narrowed a fraction. "Strong enough to float a horseshoe." A few men chuckled into their bowls. The sound was quick, surprised, like laughter had been a stranger in this room. Evelyn's throat tightened again, but this time it wasn't from fear. The rancher watched the men for a moment, then looked back at her. "You kept trying," he said. It wasn't a compliment. It was a verdict. "That counts for something." Evelyn nodded, because nodding was safer than speaking. He leaned back in his chair, and his gaze slid past her shoulder, toward the pantry door, where a ledger sat on a shelf beside the flour sacks. half covered by a rag. One corner of it curled as if someone had worried at the pages. Evelyn followed his look without thinking. A page edge showed, torn, not cleanly, but ripped in a hurry. The rancher's eyes returned to hers, as if he'd noticed her noticing. 4 hours, he said again, almost to himself. Then quieter. Tomorrow will tell. Evelyn went back to the stove, hands moving, breath measured, faith held like heat in a stove that wanted to die. And when the baby sighed against her shoulder, and the men's spoons kept clinking, steady, alive, she didn't realize she'd begun to hum until the sound had already filled the kitchen. The smell woke her before the sound did. Burnt, sharp and bitter, crept into Evelyn Hart's lungs and yanked her upright. For one blind second, she didn't know where she was. Then the iron stove loomed black against the gray light of dawn, and smoke curled from beneath the lid like a thing trying to escape. She was on her feet before the baby stirred. The biscuits were beyond saving. She dragged the pan off the heat and coughed, waving smoke away with her sleeve. Coffee boiled over at the same moment, dark foam spilling down the pot and hissing when it hit the iron. She reached to lift it, clipped the handle, and a splash arced wide. Milk tipped. White spread across the floorboards, rushing for the cracks like it knew where to hide. Evelyn stood there, breath coming too fast, hands stinging, smoke in her eyes. The room looked ruined. She tasted panic the way she tasted ash. This is where they tell you to go. She turned toward the corner where the carpet bags sat and bent to pull the baby free. He was warm, thank God, but his skin felt dry, his breath thin. He whimpered once and quieted when she pressed her palm to his back. "I know," she murmured. "I know." She shoved the ruined pan aside, wiped her hands on her apron, and dragged the carpet bags to the door. The latch was cold under her fingers. She had made it through one night. That was enough. Pride would only make it worse. The door opened behind her. 20 minutes, the rancher said. They'll be in. Evelyn turned, startled. The baby clutched to her chest. He stood framed in the doorway, coat on, hat low, already awake and whole in a way she felt very far from. "I'm leaving," she said, the words tumbling out before she could stop them. "I'm sorry for the mess. I shouldn't have—" "Not yet," he cut in. She stared at him. "No one gets sent off the morning after their first supper," he said. "That's a rule." She looked back at the stove, the milk on the floor, the scorched pan. "Sir, I've spoiled—" "You've got time," he said. He stepped into the kitchen and shut the door with his heel. The latch clicked. "Use it." He crossed to the stove and adjusted the damper with a practiced twist, choking the fire down until the smoke thinned. He moved the coffee pot aside, wiped the spill with a rag he pulled from his pocket, and set it back with less heat under it. "Pancakes," he said. Evelyn blinked. "Sir?" "Pancakes forgive mistakes," he said, already reaching for a sack of flour. "And men will eat them fast enough not to complain." She didn't argue. She slid the baby into the crook of her arm and set him in the open carpet bag, tucking a blanket around his chin. Then she stepped to the table and worked. The batter came together too thick at first. She thinned it, careful this time, watching the way it ran off the spoon. The iron griddle hissed when she poured. The first cake went down pale and uneven. "Too cold," the rancher said. She waited, counted under her breath, poured again. He set a cup upside down on the table near her elbow. "Leave that there," he said. "When you move it, check the stove." She nodded, filing it away. Boots thudded outside. A young cowboy came in with an armload of wood and froze at the sight of the breakfast chaos. "Morning, ma'am," he said, sheepish. "Eggs," the rancher told him. "Fast." The kitchen became a line. Wood fed, batter poured, cakes flipped, eggs cracked. Evelyn's hands learned quickly what her eyes had missed the night before. Heat, patience, timing. When she burned herself, she didn't curse. She shifted and kept going. The men filed in, hungry and loud, steam rising from their coats. Plates filled, coffee poured, strong but not punishing. "Better," someone said, surprised. Evelyn let her breath out slowly. After they ate, she scrubbed the floor where the milk had gone and hung the scorched pan back where it belonged. The rancher watched without comment. Later, the storekeeper arrived with salt and flour, his eyes lingering on Evelyn like she was a thing out of place. She bought 2 calico dresses, plain and sturdy, a pair of boots that pinched her toes, and a wide-brimmed hat. She paid with money that had been meant for something else and did not look back. When she returned to the kitchen, the rancher set a small ledger on the table. "Numbers don't add," he said. "You read." She did. And when she looked up, smoke-free kitchen humming, baby sleeping, cup still standing on the table, she knew she would not be leaving that morning. Not yet. The book appeared without ceremony. Evelyn found it after supper, laid squarely on the prep table, as if it had always belonged there. The cover was cracked leather, darkened by smoke and hands. A corner curled inward. When she opened it, the pages breathed out a smell of flour and cinnamon and years. No name on the first page, just notes in the margins, measurements corrected, times crossed out and rewritten. A small star beside a recipe for apple pie. Beside it, in a different hand, less sugar, more patience. Evelyn traced the pencil marks once, then closed the book gently and slid it into the crook between flour sacks, where it would not be seen unless someone knew to look. She did not thank him. He did not ask her to. The ranch settled into a rhythm that week, not gentle but reliable. Mornings started before light. Coffee first, then bread, then meat. Evelyn learned the stove's moods the way a person learns a horse. When to press, when to ease, when to step aside before it kicked. She used the book carefully, never all at once. Never where anyone could see her copying. She trusted her hands more than her eyes. The men noticed the change without naming it. Plates came back scraped clean. Voices stayed longer at the table. Someone laughed outright one evening when a biscuit split and sent gravy sliding down his wrist. "Careful," another said. "She's seasoning us." Evelyn pretended not to hear, but the sound warmed her anyway. It was near dusk when the shout came from the corral. Not a curse, not a joke. Pain carries differently. Evelyn felt it before she heard it again. Something sharp that cut across the air and stopped every other sound. She dropped the spoon she was holding and ran, apron flapping, the baby balanced on her hip, because there was no time to put him down. Men crowded the fence. A young cowboy lay on the ground inside the pen, his horse circling wide-eyed nearby. His arm was wrong, angled where it should not be. The rancher was already there, on one knee, gripping the boy's shoulder to keep him from thrashing. "Easy," he said, low and steady. "Don't look at it." The boy was white as flour. "Sir, I know." Evelyn pushed through the men before anyone could stop her. "Clear," she said. Her voice surprised her with its firmness. "Give him room." Someone started to protest. The rancher looked up, met her eyes, and said nothing. She knelt, set the baby down just out of reach of hooves, and took the boy's wrist in both hands. She did not hesitate long enough to let fear catch up. The joint was dislocated, clean but angry. "We need boards," she said. "Two, and cloth, clean." A man hesitated, another moved. Someone ran. The boy sobbed once. "It hurts." "I know," Evelyn said. She kept her voice level and her grip sure. "Listen to me. When I say now, you scream. Don't hold it. Don't fight me." She glanced at the rancher. "Hold his shoulder." He did. "Tight. Now," she said. The sound that came out of the boy did not belong to a child. It ripped through the corral and left silence behind it. Evelyn pulled, turned, set. The joint slid home with a wet click she felt in her bones. The boy went limp. She did not wait to see if anyone was watching. She splinted the arm with boards and cloth, her hands moving fast and sure, knotting the bandage the way she had learned when there was no one else to do it. When she finished, she sat back on her heels and breathed once. The men stared at her as if she had pulled a rabbit from fire. The rancher rose slowly. "You done this before," he said. Evelyn wiped her hands on her apron. "Yes, sir." He studied her face, not accusing, not curious, measuring. "Get him inside," he told the men. "Doc will want to look at it, but it'll hold." As they carried the boy away, the rancher bent and lifted the baby with a gentleness that startled her. He set him against Evelyn's chest again without a word. That night, the kitchen hummed. Evelyn baked pie from the starred page in the book. It came out crooked and dark at one edge, but the smell filled the room like a promise kept. When she set it on the table, someone laughed outright. "Well, I'll be," the young cowboy with the sling said. "She fixed me and fed me." Evelyn felt heat creep up her neck. She kept her eyes on the knife as she cut. The rancher ate in silence. When he finished, he reached for the sugar crock, paused, and set it back down. Then he pushed the pie plate closer to the center of the table. That was all. Later, when the men drifted out and the stove settled, a shadow fell across the kitchen door. The storekeeper stood there, hat in hand. "Evening, ma'am," he said. His eyes flicked to the ledger shelf, then back to her. Word gets around. Evelyn's fingers tightened on the dishcloth. "About pie?" He smiled thinly. "About women who read." The rancher's chair scraped. "You here to buy beef," he said, "or start talk?" The storekeeper lifted his hands. "Just thought you'd want to know. There's a man in town asking questions. Educated woman. Traveling with a baby. Doesn't belong." Evelyn felt the floor tilt slightly under her feet. The rancher watched her, waiting. "I can go," she said quietly, "if that's safer." He shook his head once. Running draws eyes. He reached past her and took the small notebook she kept tucked behind the flour sacks, the one with her tight, coded notes about the stove, the pantry, the hours. "Give me anything else like this," he said. "I'll keep it." She hesitated only a second, then pulled the folded pages of medical notes from her apron pocket and handed them over. He tucked them away without looking. "You stay," he said, "but you keep your head down." "Yes, sir." That night, Evelyn lay awake listening to the wind worry the eaves. The baby slept warm against her son. From the main room, she heard a man laugh softly at something someone else said. Quick, surprised. It sounded like relief. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer she had learned as a girl, one meant for borrowed beds and uncertain roofs. For the first time in a long while, the kitchen did not feel like a place she was passing through. It felt like a test she might survive. Morning found the kitchen changed. Not cleaner. Evelyn had learned that clean came and went with the day, but altered in small, stubborn ways. She cut a worn tablecloth into lengths and stitched them into simple checkered curtains, the needle biting through fabric while the baby slept in a shallow box lined with flour sacks. She set a jar of wildflowers on the sill, their stems crooked and brave, and tied a bunch of mint to a nail by the stove so its sharp green scent cut through grease and smoke. The men noticed without naming it. Someone paused at the door. Someone else washed his cup instead of leaving it on the table. The room did not soften. It steadied. The rancher watched it happen the way a man watches weather, without comment, noting what would hold. That afternoon, he set a ledger on the table and slid it toward her with one finger. "Money goes missing," he said. "Not much at a time. Enough to feel." Evelyn wiped her hands and opened it. The numbers marched down the page in a rough, impatient hand. She read them the way she read recipes, looking for where the pattern broke. There it was. A page torn out not cleanly, but ripped. Fibers rough along the edge. The loss disguised as a spill of ink and a hurried correction. She did not look up right away. She turned the page back, then forward, counting under her breath. When she finally met his eyes, she said only, "This isn't an accident." He nodded once. "I figured." "Do you want me to fix it?" she asked. "Or to find who's doing it?" His mouth tightened. "Both." Night brought a thin moon and a sound like hooves testing ground they didn't own. Evelyn had just finished boiling bandages when the baby stirred. She shifted him higher on her hip and moved to the window, parting the new curtains just enough to see the fence line. A shadow detached itself from the dark. Another followed. Not rushing. Not bold. She closed the curtain and went back to the stove. Water on, knife where she could reach it. The mint brushed her wrist when she turned, releasing its sharpness. Outside, a calf bawled once and went quiet. By the time the rancher came in, the gate was shut and the corral counted short by one. He listened as she told him what she'd seen, her words clipped and exact. "No shots," he said. "Not yet." She nodded. "They're testing." "Yes," he said, "and they'll come back." The next day, he asked her to go into town with the supply list. She hesitated only long enough to tuck the baby deeper into his blanket. The store bell rang when she pushed the door open, bright and accusing. Heads turned. The storekeeper smiled too quickly. "Ma'am." Evelyn returned the greeting and kept her eyes on the shelves. She paid careful attention to prices, to which sacks were moved first, to the ink on the order book, fresh in places it shouldn't have been. She bought 2 calico dresses, plain and serviceable, a pair of boots that bit her heel, and a wide-brimmed hat she set low. She paid with the last of her coins and did not look back. On the counter, a folded receipt bore a stamp. The wax impression caught her eye. She pressed her thumb to it, feeling the pattern through the paper. Back at the ranch, she set the receipt beside the ledger and said nothing. The rancher's gaze followed her finger. He did not ask how she knew. He had learned that asking slowed things. That evening, she baked bread and hung the mint lower so its scent would reach the door. The men came in hungry and left quieter. Someone laughed at a joke that wasn't very funny. It counted. Later, when the kitchen was empty and the stove banked low, the rancher returned with a small bundle wrapped in paper. "A dress," he said, setting it on the table. "For town." Evelyn did not touch it. "That's not necessary." He met her eyes. "You stand out when you look like you don't belong." She opened the paper. The wool was blue, deep enough to be modest, bright enough to be seen. She folded it back into the wrapping with care. "Thank you, sir." He hesitated, then added, "There's a dance Saturday." She looked down at the baby, then back at him. "I don't dance." "Neither do I," he said. "That's not the point." Saturday came with cold that bit clean and left no mercy. Evelyn dressed in the blue wool and tied her hair back. She pinned the baby's blanket closed and handed him to the doctor's wife with a nod and a promise she did not speak aloud. The hall smelled of pine and sweat and sugar. Music threaded through it, fiddle and feet and the scrape of chairs. When the rancher offered his arm, she took it because refusing would have drawn more eyes. They stood near the wall, watching. She watched hands. He watched faces. On the table near the door lay a stack of papers weighted with a stone. She drifted closer under the cover of conversation and saw the stamp again. Wax, pressed with the same mark as the receipt. Her heart ticked faster, steady as a metronome. The music slowed. The rancher turned to her. "May I?" She placed her hand in his because it was the simplest way to keep moving. He held it properly, distance measured, and they stepped together into the line of dancers. It was not graceful. It was careful. Enough. As they turned, she saw a man near the papers glance their way, then away. She let her heel scuff just enough to drift closer to the table and brushed her skirt against the stack. One page shifted. She saw the number she needed. When the song ended, the rancher steered them back to the wall without comment. On the way home, the wagon lurched. A pin slipped. The wheel shuddered and would have come free if he hadn't caught it in time. Evelyn picked up the small wedge of wood that had been cut wrong on purpose and turned it in her hand. "They want us scared," she said. "They'll get stubborn," he replied. That night, she replaced the curtains she'd torn, sewn and checked the latch twice. She set the ledger beside the flour sacks and slid the receipt beneath it like a bookmark. The baby slept. Outside, something moved and did not come closer. Evelyn stood by the stove and breathed in mint and iron and smoke. And for a moment, just a moment, she let herself believe that order could be built from small things if a person kept choosing them. Then she banked the fire and prayed for morning. The baby coughed at dawn, not loud, not long, just enough to stop Evelyn's hands in the wash basin and turn her head. She pressed 2 fingers beneath his chin and felt the heat there, too warm for comfort, not yet a danger. She lifted him and breathed against his cap until his shoulders loosened. By the time the rancher came through the kitchen, she had the kettle on and the herbs sorted by smell instead of name. "We'll need medicine," she said before he could speak, "and salt, cloth." He took in the baby's face, the kettle's first tremor. "Town," he said. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. He nodded once. We go together. The choice sat between them like a coin already spent. Staying would have been safer. Going was necessary. The baby coughed again, and necessity won. She dressed him warm and tight. She dressed herself plain. When she stepped back into the kitchen to fetch the ledger copy she'd marked with symbols, a small parcel waited on the table. Brown paper, twine tied clean. She stopped, looked toward the hall. No one there. Evelyn untied the knot. Blue wool folded inside. Deep, steady, the color of a winter river that knows its banks. She touched it once and let her hand fall away. When the rancher came back in, she held the bundle out. This isn't. You'll be seen, he said. Best be seen on your terms. She swallowed. Thank you, sir. He didn't answer. He was already reaching for his coat. The wagon ride into town cut cold. Evelyn kept the baby tucked under her shawl and counted the fence posts as they passed. When the store bell rang, it rang for her own. Heads turned, some curious, some calculating. Ma'am, the storekeeper said, too smooth. His eyes flicked to the blue wool, then to the baby. Back so soon. Evelyn set the list on the counter and began to fill it, reading prices aloud as if it were habit, not scrutiny. She compared weights. She noted ink that hadn't dried. She bought what she needed and a little more. Thread, needles, cinnamon. The rancher stood a step back, hat low, watching hands instead of faces. A man leaned against the far shelf, well-dressed for the season, gloves too clean. He smiled when Evelyn looked his way. Didn't expect to see learning carried so far west, he said pleasantly. Evelyn did not smile back. I didn't expect to be tested on it, she replied, and turned away. On the counter, a paper waited beneath a stone. Wax stamped it shut. The impression was the same as the receipt she'd folded into the ledger days before. She did not touch it. She did not need to. Outside, the sky had that low, waiting look that meant snow or trouble. The rancher helped her up and took the reins without comment. Saturday, he said as they turned out of town. There's a dance. She watched the road. I don't dance. That makes two of us, he said. We'll stand near the wall. Saturday came anyway. She wore the chisson, blue wool because refusing would have drawn eyes. She pinned the baby's blanket with a clean stitch and handed him to the doctor's wife with a nod that held more prayer than words. The hall smelled of pine boughs and sweat and sugar. Music lifted and fell. The rancher offered his arm. She took it because not taking it would have meant something else. They stood where they said they would, near the wall, close enough to hear the music without belonging to it. Evelyn watched the table by the door, papers stacked, a stone set on top, wax stamps catching the light. The man with the clean gloves stood nearby, laughing softly. When the tune slowed, the rancher turned to her. May I? She placed her hand in his because it was the simplest way to move. He held it properly, distance kept, and they stepped into the turn. It wasn't dancing. It was counting. As they passed the table, Evelyn let her heels scuff and her skirt brush the edge. One page shifted. A number caught her eye and settled where it would not leave. The song ended. Applause rose. They returned to the wall without a word. On the way home, the wagon jolted. The wheels shuddered. The rancher reined in hard and jumped down, hands moving fast. A pin lay in the dirt where it shouldn't have been. "They don't want us dead," Evelyn said quietly. "They want us afraid." "They'll get stubborn," he replied, fitting the pin back with a strike of his hammer. At the ranch, she banked the stove and checked the baby's breath. It eased with the steam and the quiet. She laid the blue dress folded on the chair and set the ledger beside the flour sacks, the receipt tucked beneath it like a bookmark. Outside, the wind shifted. Evelyn knelt by the stove and pressed her palms together, heat seeping in. "Lord," she whispered, and did not finish the sentence. The fire answered by holding. The wind rose before dawn, not loud yet, just persistent enough to worry the seams. Evelyn felt it in the way the stove drew, air pulling harder through the damper, flame leaning as if listening. She set a hand on the iron and held it there until the heat steadied her. The baby slept tucked close, his breath small and warm against her ribs. By mid-morning, the ranch had its list: salt, cloth, medicine, nails, a spool of wire. The rancher folded the paper once and slid it into his pocket. "We'll stand where we can see," he said. "Then we'll leave." "Yes, sir." Before they went, Evelyn wrapped the baby and carried him to the small room behind the hall, where the doctor kept extra blankets. The doctor's wife took him without fuss, checking his breath with a practiced touch and nodding once. "I'll sit with him," she said. "You do what you came to do." Evelyn hesitated only long enough to smooth the blanket flat. Then she turned back into the light. The hall was already filling. Pine boughs hung crooked over the doorway. A fiddle tuned itself sharp and then kinder. Boots scuffed, chairs scraped. The room smelled of cold wool and sugar and something older, anticipation with its teeth filed down. The rancher offered his arm. Evelyn took it because she had learned the cost of refusing simple things. They took their place near the wall, exactly where he had said. From there, she could see the table by the door with its neat stack of papers weighted by a stone. She could see the men who hovered near it, the ones who pretended not to watch. She watched hands. A man in clean gloves lifted a cup and did not drink. Another man laughed a fraction too late. Someone smoothed the edge of a paper as if it were a habit, not a tell. The music struck up. Couples moved. Evelyn did not move. "May I?" the rancher said quietly. She placed her hand in his because it made the smallest ripple. He held it properly, distance measured, palm steady. They stepped into the line. It was not graceful. It was careful. The kind of careful that kept doors open. As they turned, the room passed in pieces. The pine boughs, the papers, the stone, the clean gloves. Evelyn let her heel drag just enough to drift closer to the table. Her skirt brushed the stack. A page shifted. She saw the stamp again, the wax pressed with a mark she now knew by feel. She did not look longer than it took to breathe. The song ended. Applause rose and fell like a wave that didn't quite reach shore. They returned to the wall without speaking. A voice rose near the door, pleasant, loud enough to carry. "Best sign before the weather turns," the man in clean gloves said. "Paper keeps better when it's dry." The rancher's jaw tightened. He did not answer. They left early. Outside, the sky had lowered its ceiling. The wagon rolled, then jolted. The rancher hauled the reins and jumped down. A pin lay in the dirt where it had no business being. They're pressing, he said, fitting it back with a single efficient strike. They want us tired, Evelyn said. He nodded. Tired men make poor choices. At the ranch, she banked the stove and set a kettle to steam. The baby's cough had eased, but she did not trust ease. She boiled water and set out cloth and thread, and the small bottle the doctor's wife had pressed into her palm. Later, the rancher brought the ledger to the kitchen and set it beside the flour sacks. He did not open it. "Show me," he said. Evelyn unfolded her scrap of paper and drew with the pencil she kept hidden. Lines and marks, not words. Dates, weights, a small star where the numbers did not agree with the road. "This stamp," she said, tapping the air above the page. "It appears when a load changes hands twice. The first time is honest. The second time isn't," he finished. "Yes, sir." He leaned back and studied the ceiling as if it might answer him. "If I confront him now, he'll deny," Evelyn said, "and hurry." "Then we wait," he said. The waiting did not last. That night, the wind turned mean. Not yet a storm, but the kind of cold that tests hinges and tempers. The men ate quickly and went quiet. One by one they drifted off, boots thudding soft as apology. Evelyn washed and wiped and set the cup she used as a marker near her elbow. When she moved it, she checked the stove. When she checked the stove, she counted the minutes. Outside, a sound touched the fence and withdrew. She froze. The baby stirred. She pressed him close and breathed into his cap until his shoulders loosened. Then she lifted the kettle and poured steaming water into a basin, setting it by the door where the light would catch it if someone tried the latch. The latch did not move. The sound came again, hooves testing ground they didn't own. Evelyn did not go to the window. She did not need to. The rancher came in with the smell of cold on him and closed the door behind him. "They took a steer," he said quietly. "Just one." "Testing," she said. "Yes." He crossed to the table and reached for the ledger, then stopped. "You stay here tonight." "I always do," she said. He nodded, then hesitated. "If it turns—" "I'll hold," she said. It was not bravado. It was a plan. He left again. The door shut. The wind worried the eaves. Evelyn worked. She set the kettle to boil again. She laid out bandages. She tied a length of wire near the door where it would ring a cup if it was pushed. She banked the fire high and hung fresh mint so its scent would carry. Near midnight, a shadow crossed the window. A hand lifted, paused, and fell away. Evelyn did not move. The cup chimed once, faint. She lifted the kettle and held it ready, heat singing in her arms. The shadow withdrew. Morning came gray and thin. The rancher returned with frost on his coat, and the steer still gone. "They'll come back," he said. "Yes," she said. "After the storm." He looked at her then, really looked, as if measuring not her courage but her cost. "You should know," he said. "If this breaks wrong—" "I know," she said, and meant more than one thing. When he left, Evelyn sat by the stove and pressed her palms together, heat seeping in. For a heartbeat, she let herself remember a room with windows and books and quiet. Then she let it go. "I chose this," she told herself, and stood to make breakfast. Outside, the sky lowered another inch. The sky did not break all at once. It lowered. Evelyn noticed it in the way sound traveled, how the hammer strikes from the barn came back flatter, how the wind lost its edge and became a weight. She felt it in the baby's breath, shallow and quick, and in the stove's pull, air dragging harder through the flue as if the fire were bracing itself. She did not wait for orders. Water first. She filled every bucket and barrel she could find, setting them in a line that cut across the kitchen like a boundary. Wood next. She stacked it high and close, the driest pieces nearest the stove, the damp set aside where they could wait their turn. She hauled the big pot from its hook and set it on the iron, poured until her arms shook, then poured more. By the time the rancher came in, her hair was damp with sweat, and the baby slept bundled in a nest she'd built from flour sacks and spare blankets. "You feel it," he said. "Yes, sir." "Men are bringing the strays in," he said. "I'm riding for the back pasture." She set the ladle down and turned. "Don't go far." His mouth twitched, not quite a smile. "I won't." She stepped into his path before he could turn away. The words pressed against her ribs, heavy as the pot on the stove. "There's something you should know," she said. He waited. "The baby," she said, and forced herself not to look down. "He doesn't have papers." The wind pushed at the door. The latch rattled once and settled. "He's not mine," she said. "Not by blood." The rancher's eyes stayed on her face. He did not reach for his hat. He did not reach for his gun. "I found him," she said. "Left where cold would finish the work. I took him because there was no one else. I kept going because stopping would have killed him." Silence held. "If the law comes," she said, "they'll take him." He considered that, long and careful, as if weighing grain by hand. "They won't," he said finally. "Not tonight." "That's not what I asked," she said quietly. He met her gaze. "Tonight comes first." Outside, a shout carried, men calling to one another, names shortened by urgency. A gust of wind shoved rain against the window, hard and sudden, like thrown gravel. The rancher reached down and lifted the baby, adjusting the blanket with a gentleness that had become familiar. He set the child back into the nest and tucked the edge in tight. "You did right," he said. "We'll answer the rest when we have daylight to stand in." Evelyn's throat burned. She nodded once. The first knock came just after dark, not loud, not demanding. A testing sound, knuckles against wood. Evelyn did not move. She ladled hot water into a basin and set it where the lantern light would catch steam and turn it into a warning. She banked the stove higher and hung fresh cloth by the door. Another knock. Then a voice, friendly enough to be dangerous. "Evenin'," it said. "Storms. Coming. Figured we'd ask for a bit of shelter." Evelyn kept her voice level. "Ranch is full." A pause. The wind shoved again. "We saw a light," the voice said. "Just need to warm our hands." Evelyn lifted the baby and pressed him to her shoulder, breathing into his cap until his small body loosened. She did not go to the window. She did not open the door. From the yard came the sound of boots shifting, hooves stamping, men settling into positions they had practiced without calling practice by name. The voice sighed. "Shame." Footsteps retreated. The wind took the space they left and filled it with rain. Then the storm came in earnest. Rain hammered the roof until the boards sang. Wind found every seam and worried it. Men stumbled in soaked to the bone, faces gray, hands numb. Evelyn worked without pause, coats off, boots by the fire, hot drink pressed into shaking hands. She cut cloth and bound a gash on a forearm. She set a broken finger straight and splinted it with a board meant for shelves. The kitchen turned into something else. Not a room, but a process. A man went down near the door, breath hitching, eyes unfocused. Evelyn had him on the table before anyone could argue, rolling his shoulder, checking his ribs. She brewed willow bark and coaxed it down him, one swallow at a time. The rancher came in with a man slung over his shoulder. Mud streaked up both of them. "Here," he said. She took the weight without comment. They moved like this had been rehearsed, though it hadn't. Later, she could not have said how much later, the rain changed pitch. The wind screamed. A crash sounded from the far fence, wood giving way. Someone swore. Someone laughed, sharp and scared. "Inside!" the rancher called. "Lock it!" Evelyn slid the bar into place and tied the wire she'd strung to a cup. She set the kettle back on the stove and kept it there, steam rising steady as prayer. A shadow crossed the window. A hand lifted. The cup chimed once. Evelyn lifted the kettle and held it ready, heat singing in her arms. Her heart did not race. It counted. The shadow lingered, then moved on. Outside, cattle bawled, confused and wild. The rancher's voice cut through the storm, firm and carrying, calling men back from the dark. A gun cracked once, not to hit, but to speak. The sound flattened against the rain and died. When dawn finally pried at the edges of the sky, it found the kitchen still standing. The storm left behind a wrecked fence and mud that swallowed boots. It left behind a missing handful of cattle and men who moved like they'd aged a year overnight. It left the baby breathing easier. Evelyn poured coffee and set it where hands could find it. She did not sit. The rancher came in last, coat heavy with wet, eyes rimmed red from wind. "They took a few," he said. "Not enough to finish us." "That's not what they wanted," she said. "No," he agreed. "They wanted us thin." He looked at the baby, asleep again, and then at Evelyn. "You should know," he said. "If anyone asks—" "I know," she said. He nodded once. "Get some rest." She watched him go, then leaned her forehead against the warm iron of the stove. "Thank you," she thought, and did not say for what. Outside, the clouds thinned to tatters. Light found the ground again. Inside, Evelyn set the kettle back on and kept working, because work was what held when promises could not. By mid-morning, the wind had spent itself, leaving the ranch in pieces it did not bother to hide. Mud clung to everything. Fence rails lay twisted where the ground had given way. A single boot sat abandoned near the well, filled with rainwater and silt, as if someone had stepped out of it and kept running. Inside, the kitchen held. Evelyn worked the way she had through the night, quiet, exact, moving from one need to the next before it had time to grow teeth. She stripped wet cloth from shoulders and replaced it with dry. She rinsed mud from cuts and set bone where bone belonged. She kept the fire even and the coffee bitter enough to wake men who needed waking. A man with a torn calf was laid across the table, boots still on because there had been no time. Evelyn cut the leather away and cleaned the wound with whiskey, her hands steady while the man bit down on a strap and swore into it. "Hold," she said. He did. She stitched knot by knot, silk thread boiled and ready, honey packed where blood wanted to return. When she tied off, she pressed clean cloth into place and wrapped until the shaking in his leg eased. "You'll walk," she said. "Not today." He nodded, pale and grateful, and let himself be guided to the bench. Another man coughed too hard and would not stop. Evelyn mixed willow bark tea and held the cup until his hands steadied enough to take it. She counted breaths with him until the sound in his chest softened. Between one need and the next, she checked the baby. He slept in the nest she'd rebuilt after the storm, cheeks flushed, lashes damp. She dampened a cloth and touched his forehead. Still warm but not climbing. She whispered a prayer she'd learned as a girl and had not trusted for years. "Please, just this." The rancher came in carrying a bucket of water from the far barrel, boots sinking with each step. He set it down and did not speak until she looked up. "Fence on the north line is gone," he said. "We'll patch it." "They'll come back," she said. "Yes. For the cattle." "Yes. And the baby." He didn't argue. "Not while I'm breathing." She nodded once and went back to work. Near noon, a rider appeared at the edge of the yard, alone and cautious. He raised both hands as he approached and waited to be seen. The rancher stepped out to meet him, keeping the door behind him open just enough that Evelyn could hear. "Message from town," the rider said. "Bankman's riding this way." Evelyn closed her eyes for the space of one breath. So soon. The rancher came back in, mud on his coat and resolve set deep. "Finish what you're doing," he said. "Then we'll talk." The bankman arrived with his hat clean and his boots still polished, as if mud were a personal affront. He held papers in a leather folio and smiled without warmth. "Morning," he said. "Sorry to intrude after such weather." He glanced around the kitchen, taking in the bandages, the men sleeping in shifts on the floor, the kettle never leaving the fire. His eyes lingered a beat too long on the baby. Evelyn felt the weight of that look settle somewhere cold. "We're busy," the rancher said. "Make it quick." The bankman opened his folio and laid the papers flat, careful not to touch the damp table. "I'm afraid I can't. This requires a signature." He slid the document forward. Evelyn wiped her hands and stepped closer. "May I see?" she asked. The bankman hesitated. "Are you—" "She keeps my books," the rancher said. "Show her." The paper spoke its lies plainly if you knew how to listen. Dates that did not match deliveries. Sums that grew teeth overnight. A seal pressed where a different seal should have been. Evelyn set the paper down. "This isn't right," she said. The bankman's smile thinned. "It's standard." "It's altered," she said. "And you know it." The rancher watched her, something like pride and something like worry passing across his face. "I can pay what's owed," he said. "I won't sign this." The bankman gathered his papers, eyes hard now. "Then I'll return with the law." "When?" Evelyn asked. "Today," he said, "before nightfall." He tipped his hat and left, boots still clean. The room breathed out all at once. Evelyn leaned back against the counter and let the ache in her legs make itself known. The rancher poured coffee and set a cup into her hands without comment. "You didn't have to," he said quietly. "Yes," she said, "I did." A man on the floor stirred and called her name. She went to him and adjusted his bandage, her movements sure. Outside, clouds thinned into pale strips. The land showed its damage plainly. By afternoon, word spread faster than repair. A wagon from town arrived with a doctor and a preacher riding together, both looking as though they'd been pulled from their beds before they were ready. The doctor knelt by the table and examined the stitched leg, nodding approval. "Clean work," he said. "Who taught you?" "Life," Evelyn said. The preacher looked at the baby and then at Evelyn, questions written in the crease between his brows. "We'll talk later," the rancher said. "When the men are fed." Evelyn fed them. Stew first, thick and hot. Bread next, the crust finally right. She kept the bowls moving and the benches filled, turning hunger into quiet. As dusk gathered again, the rancher pulled her aside. "They'll come tonight," he said, "for the papers or the child." She swallowed. "Then we'll be ready." He hesitated, then reached into his vest and pressed a small object into her palm. It was a pocket watch, worn smooth. "If I don't come back," he said, "this will get you to town." She closed his fingers around it and pushed it back. "Don't talk like that." He almost smiled. "You have a way of telling a man what to do." She met his eyes. "So, do you?" Night fell without ceremony. Evelyn set the lanterns high and the kettle low. She laid out clean cloth and sharpened the knife she hoped not to use. She checked the baby again and whispered another prayer, this one shorter. "Stay." Outside, boots crunched. Voices murmured. A match flared and went out. The rancher took his place by the door. Evelyn stood by the stove, heat steady, hands ready. She thought, briefly and without drama, "I have come too far to leave now." The knock came, firm this time. The rancher did not open the door. Evelyn held the kettle and waited for the next sound, counting her breaths the way she had taught the men to count theirs. Whatever came next, it would not find them empty-handed. The knock did not come again. Instead, dawn arrived like a held breath finally released, thin light slipping under cloud and finding the ground without asking permission. The yard lay scarred and honest in that light. Fence rails leaned where they'd fallen. Hoof prints braided the mud into stories anyone with time could read. Inside, the fire still held. Evelyn poured coffee before anyone asked for it. She set cups where hands would reach when they woke, then moved back to the nest by the stove. The baby slept, chest rising and falling with more ease than the night before. She laid 2 fingers against his cheek and felt warmth answer. "Thank you, Lord." She didn't add anything else. The rancher came in with mud to his knees and a coil of wire over his shoulder. He set it down and studied the room, men sleeping in turns, bandages clean, kettles singing low. "You kept it together," he said. "So did you," she said. He took a cup and drank it black. "We lost some head," he said. "Not enough to finish us." "They'll try again," she said. "Yes." He watched the baby for a moment, then turned away and began pulling on dry gloves. By mid-morning, the yard filled with movement. Men patched what they could, set posts where posts would hold, and marked the places where ground had lied. Evelyn moved among them with bread and water, her presence practical, her eyes always counting. The bankman arrived with the sun at his back. This time he brought company. A deputy stepped down first, hat brim low, boots already resigned to mud. The bankman followed, folio tucked tight beneath his arm. He smiled the same smile as before, as if smiles could be reused. "Morning," he said. "I'm afraid this can't wait." The rancher did not offer him a seat. "It will," he said. "You'll wait until the men are fed." The deputy shifted his weight. "Let's hear him out." Evelyn set the ladle down and wiped her hands. She came to the table without hurry. "Show us the paper," she said. The bank man did, smoothing it as though paper liked to be touched that way. Evelyn read again, slower this time. She turned the page and turned it back, her finger finding the seam where a corner had once been torn and pressed again. "This seal," she said, tapping lightly. "It's wrong." The bankman's eyes flicked to the deputy and back. "It's legal." "It's familiar," Evelyn said, "but it isn't the one used on the date you claim." The deputy frowned. "How do you know?" Evelyn did not look at the rancher when she answered. "Because I keep records, and because the store receipts from that week show a different mark." The bankman's smile hardened. "You're not the owner." "No," she said. "I'm the one who noticed." She reached for the ledger the rancher kept locked in his desk and set it on the table. She opened to the place she had marked in pencil and laid it flat. "Here," she said. "Deliveries delayed by weather. Prices spiked the day after. And this page," she lifted the edge where fibers still showed, "was torn." The deputy leaned closer, interest waking in his face. "Why tear it?" "To make a story fit," Evelyn said. The bankman closed his folio with a soft snap. "This is nonsense." The rancher folded his arms. "Then bring the law." The deputy cleared his throat. "I am the law." Evelyn met his eyes. "Then do the job." A beat passed. The deputy nodded once. "I'll need to see the store records." "They're on their way," a voice said from the door. The storekeeper stepped in, hat in his hands, looking like a man who had weighed sleep against conscience and chosen poorly for both. Behind him came the doctor and the preacher, coats still damp. "I brought what you asked," the storekeeper said, setting a bundle on the table. "And I'll say this plain. I've been told when to hold shipments and when to rush them. I didn't like it, but I did it." The bankman's face went white, then red. "You'll regret that." The preacher folded his hands. "Threats won't help." The doctor pushed his spectacles up his nose. "Neither will lies. I can speak to the medicine shipments held back last month." The deputy took the papers and began to read. He did not look up for a long time. Outside, men worked and pretended not to listen. At last, the deputy straightened. "I'll take this to town," he said. "No one signs anything today." The bankman opened his mouth. "Today," the deputy repeated, sharper now. They left as they'd come, boots muddied at last. The room exhaled. Evelyn sagged against the counter, feeling the morning catch up to her all at once. The rancher brought her a chair without asking and set it behind her knees. "Sit," he said. She did. The preacher lingered by the door. "About the child," he said gently. Evelyn lifted her chin. "He stays." "For now," the preacher said. "There are forms. We'll need to be careful." "We will," the rancher said. The doctor nodded. "I'll check on him again before night." When they were gone, the rancher leaned against the table, eyes on the ledger. "You didn't have to stand that close," he said. "Yes," she said again. "I did." He reached into his vest and took out a small box, then stopped and set it back where it had been. "Not yet," he said, more to himself than to her. Evelyn pretended not to notice. The afternoon wore on, the work steady. The baby woke and cried, then settled again after she fed him. She hummed without realizing it, an old hymn that had once lived in her bones. Near dusk, a boy rode in hard from the north line, breathless. "Fence is patched," he said, "but there's sign, fresh." The rancher nodded. "We'll keep watch." Evelyn set the kettle back on and added more water. She laid clean cloth within reach and checked the lanterns. The habits of the night before returned without asking. When the first star showed, the rancher stood by the window and watched it. "They'll test us," he said. "One more time." Evelyn joined him, close enough to share the glass but not touching. "Then let them." He glanced down at her, something like surprise crossing his face. "I once thought," she said softly, and stopped. The words pressed, then retreated. "I once thought I would never do this again." She swallowed. He waited, then nodded when she did not continue. Outside, a sound carried, metal against wood, deliberate. Evelyn lifted the kettle and held it ready. Inside, the fire answered, steady and bright, as if it had made a promise of its own. They rode into town as if the road itself were a test. The wagon creaked under its own patience. The rancher drove without hurry, reins loose, eyes forward. Evelyn sat beside him, the ledger wrapped in oilcloth on her lap, her gloved thumb resting where a corner once tore and lied about it. The baby slept against her, small weight anchoring her to the seat. Town had the look of a place that remembered storms but preferred to forget them. Mud dried in uneven patches. Doors opened just wide enough to see who was passing. The bell over the general store rang once, sharp and curious, then fell quiet. They did not go to the store. They went to the hall. It was not much of a building. Planks, benches, a desk scarred by years of elbows and stamps. But it knew how to hold a crowd. By the time they arrived, men had drifted in from the street, hats in hands, faces turned toward the front, where the deputy stood with his papers stacked square. The bankman was already there. He stood a little apart, coat buttoned, chin lifted as if height could be borrowed. Two men flanked him, town men, not riders, hands clean, eyes busy. The rancher tied the team and stepped down. He lifted the baby from Evelyn's arms and handed him back after adjusting the blanket. It was a small thing, done without comment, and it said more than words would have. Inside, the air carried dust and expectation. The deputy cleared his throat. "We're here to settle a question," he said. "About a debt." The bankman smiled, practiced. "And about property." Evelyn moved to the table and set the ledger down. She did not open it yet. "Proceed," the deputy said. The bankman laid his papers out first, dates and sums marching in neat lines. He spoke of obligations and agreements, of weather that did not excuse failure, of signatures that bound regardless of feeling. The rancher listened without interruption. When the bankman finished, the deputy nodded. "Your turn." Evelyn opened the ledger. She did not speak at first. She turned pages slowly, letting the sound of paper do some of the work. Then she pointed, once. "This delivery," she said. "Delayed by snow. Price adjusted after the fact." She pointed again. "This seal, not the one used that week. A murmur moved the benches. The bankman laughed softly. Anyone can claim that. The storekeeper stood from the back. Not anyone, he said. Me. He came forward, hat twisting in his hands, and set his bundle down. Receipts fanned out, dates matching what Evelyn had marked in pencil weeks before. I was told when to hold shipments, he said, when to let prices climb. The bankman's smile thinned. You'll regret? The preacher rose. Enough! The doctor stepped up next, spectacles glinting. Medicine delayed, he said. I wrote it down. So did she. The deputy took the ledger and receipts and read. He read longer than anyone liked. Why tear this page, Carl? He asked, tapping the ledger where fibers showed white. The bankman opened his mouth. Evelyn spoke first. Because the truth didn't fit. Silence fell. The deputy straightened. I'll take this under advisement. Today, the bankman said, sharp now. I want this resolved today. You'll have an answer, the deputy said. Not the one you're trying to buy. A ripple moved the room. Someone exhaled. Someone else shifted a bench. The bankman gathered his papers with hands that had begun to shake. This isn't over. No, the rancher said. It is not. As they turned to leave, the bankman's eyes found the baby. About the child, he said. There are procedures. The room stilled. The rancher stepped closer, not threatening, simply present. Say what you mean. I mean, the bankman said, that children without papers become wards. Evelyn felt the familiar cold gather, then pass. The doctor cleared his throat. The child is ill, he said, and improving. The preacher added, and not to be used as leverage. The deputy lifted a hand. For now, he said, the child stays where he is. For now, the bankman echoed, tasting the words. They left the hall to a street that pretended not to watch. The wagon waited, patient as ever. They did not speak until they were clear of town. The rancher drove. Evelyn held the baby and watched the road unspool. You didn't have to bring him, she said finally. I wanted to, he said. She nodded. They reached the ranch at dusk. Smoke rose clean from the chimney. Men moved in the yard, doing the work that needed doing whether papers said so or not. Inside the house that the rancher went to his desk. He opened a drawer, then closed it again. He leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. Evelyn set the baby in the nest by the stove and checked his breathing. She added wood, careful not to crowd the fire. The rancher cleared his throat. There's something, he said. She turned. He took out a small box and set it on the desk between them. He did not open it. Not now, he said, as if answering a question she hadn't asked. I won't ask you to choose while this is still in motion. Evelyn looked at the box, then away. Thank you. Night came without asking permission. Evelyn cooked. The men ate. Laughter rose once, then again, careful at first, then easier. Someone told a story about a horse with opinions. Someone else answered with one about a mule that knew the way home better than its owner. The rancher did not speak much. He watched. Later, when the dishes were stacked and the men drifted out, he stayed behind. They'll push, he said. Yes. Hard. Yes. He hesitated. If it comes to it, She held up a hand. We'll answer what comes. He nodded, accepting the boundary for what it was. Outside, a sound moved near the fence. Metal on wood. Deliberate. Testing. The rancher's hand went to the lamp. Evelyn's went to the kettle. They waited. The sound faded. The rancher blew out a breath. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll be ready." Evelyn watched the fire settle and thought, "I have already chosen." She did not say it. She checked the baby one more time and laid her hand against the warm iron of the stove. Outside, the stars came out, sharp and numerous, like witnesses who had decided to stay. The fire did not announce itself. It crept. Evelyn smelled it first. Pitch and dry wood heated too fast. She was at the sink, rinsing a pot, when the scent sharpened into warning. She crossed the room in 3 steps and lifted the lamp. Orange licked the edge of the yard where the woodpile leaned. A spark jumped. Another followed. "Fire," she said, not loud, just certain. The rancher was already moving. He hauled the door open and shouted once, sharp enough to cut through sleep. Men poured out of the bunkhouse half-dressed, boots in hands, faces waking as they ran. Evelyn wrapped the baby and moved him to the back room without thinking, setting him in the deepest corner and sliding a chest in front of the door. She checked the latch, then the window, then laid wet cloth along the sill. The kettle went back on the stove. She kept it there. Outside, flames caught and spread along the stacked wood, eager as rumor. Buckets flew, water slapped. Someone slipped and swore. A shot cracked, not at the fire, but beyond it. Another followed, closer. "They're here," someone yelled. The rancher took position by the door, rifle steady, not firing yet. "Hold," he called. "Don't scatter." The flames flared brighter, fed by wind that had decided to return. Smoke rolled low and found the kitchen, stinging eyes and throats. Evelyn worked by memory. She soaked cloth and pressed it into gaps. She moved the flour sacks farther from the wall and dragged the table closer to block draft. She counted breaths. She kept counting. A shape broke from the smoke. A man with a torch, arm raised. The rancher fired once, low and true. The torch fell and died in mud. More shadows shifted. "Get back," the rancher called. "You want it, say it." A voice answered from the dark, smooth and practiced. "We want what's owed." The bankman stepped into the lantern light, coat collar up, eyes bright with the reflection of fire. 2 men flanked him, guns ready. "This ends tonight," he said. "Sign, and we go." The rancher did not lower his rifle. "You burned my wood." "You burned your bridges," the bankman said. Evelyn stepped forward before the rancher could stop her. She did not raise her voice. "You won't have him," she said. The bankman's eyes flicked to her, then to the house. "The child," he said. "Hand him over, and this becomes easier." The rancher's rifle lifted a fraction. Evelyn held up her hand. "No." The word landed heavy and stayed there. "I'll go," she said. "Not the child." The rancher turned on her. "No." She met his eyes. "If it's me or him, it isn't," he said. The bankman smiled. "You see? Reason." Evelyn shook her head. "You don't get to choose who pays." She stepped back and opened the door behind her just enough to let the lantern light spill into the yard. Smoke swirled, thinned. Men with buckets paused. listening. "You want paper?" she said. "Here." She held up the ledger. The bankman's smile faltered. Evelyn tore a page free, not the marked one, but the cover sheet that made the book look whole when it wasn't. She held it to the flame of the lamp. It blackened, curled. "Every lie you wrote lives here," she said. "You don't want it burned." "Stop," the bankman snapped. "Call them off," she said. The rancher watched her, something fierce and worried in his eyes. He did not stop her. The bankman hesitated. The fire crackled. Men shifted, boots sucking at mud. "Put it out," he said sharply to his men. "Now!" Buckets flew again. Water slapped. Smoke thinned. Evelyn let the page burn to ash and closed the ledger, hands steady. "You're finished," the rancher said. The bankman laughed, thin and ugly. "You think this wins you anything?" "No," the rancher said. "It wins me tomorrow." He lowered the rifle a fraction and made a decision that would cost him. "I'll sell stock," he said. "Enough to cover the honest debt, not a dollar more." The bankman stared. "You'd cripple your own operation?" "To keep my land," the rancher said, "and my people." The word landed. People. Silence followed. Then the bankman nodded once, stiff. "I'll have the papers corrected," he said. "For now." "For good," the rancher said. The bankman turned and melted back into the dark with his men, leaving the yard steaming and scarred. When it was over, when the flames were dead and the smoke lifted, the rancher sagged against the fence and rubbed his eyes with the heel of his hand. Evelyn went to him and pressed a cup of water into his grip. He drank and breathed. "You shouldn't have," he said quietly. "Yes," she said. "I should have." He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing the cost she'd carried and the line she would not cross. They worked until the yard was safe and the last ember cooled. Men drifted off, tired and quiet. Inside, the house smelled of wet cloth and iron. Evelyn checked the baby. He slept through it all, unaware of the night that had tried and failed. The rancher closed the door and leaned his forehead against it for a moment. When he turned, his face was set. "I'll go to town in the morning," he said. "I'll sell what I must." "I'll go with you," she said. "No," he said gently. "You'll keep the house." She nodded, accepting the division of labor for what it was. He crossed to the desk and took out the small box again. He set it down, then pushed it away. "After," he said. "Yes," she said. Later, when the lamps were low and the house had settled, Evelyn sat by the stove and held her hands to the warmth. She let herself shake then, just a little, where no one could see. "I am still here," she thought. "We are still here." Outside, the stars burned cold and clean. Inside, the fire answered, steady as a vow that had not yet found its words. Snow came soft, the kind that didn't argue with the ground. Evelyn noticed it first on the windowsill, a thin white line where the night had laid something clean and meant it. She set the kettle on and watched steam rise, slow and faithful, and for a moment she let herself believe that quiet could be trusted. The baby woke with a sound that was almost a laugh. She lifted him and felt the steadiness of his weight, the ordinary miracle of warmth where it belonged. She kissed his hair and crossed the kitchen, her steps falling into the habits that had held when promises could not. By the time the rancher came in, snow had claimed the yard. He stamped his boots and hung his coat, eyes going to the stove as if to check on an old friend. "Town's done," he said. "For now." She nodded. "Did you sell?" "Yes." He did not say what it cost. He didn't need to. She poured him coffee and set it where his hand would find it. He took it and warmed his fingers, watching the baby watch him with solemn interest. The house breathed. Later, men drifted in with laughter carried low, respectful of the season. Someone brought a fiddle. Someone else found a harmonica that knew 2 tunes and would not learn a third. Pine boughs appeared as if by accident, hung where nails had already made space for them. Evelyn worked the kitchen the way she always did. Clean, exact, unafraid. She tied a wreath from what was at hand and hung it by the door. She set a small bowl of cinnamon where the heat would wake it. She folded cloth into curtains and pinned them straight. The rancher watched from the table, not in the way of a man waiting to be served, but in the way of a man keeping time. When dusk settled, the preacher arrived with his coat dusted white and a book tucked beneath his arm. He spoke of the season and of keeping faith when faith had to work for a living. He prayed without flourish, naming the weather and the land and the people who had learned to hold one another upright. Evelyn bowed her head. "Thank you," she thought again, and let the word mean all the things she could not say aloud. After, there was food enough. Stew that had learned patience. Bread that broke clean. Pie that leaned but smelled like home. Laughter came in small, honest bursts, seasoning the room the way she had learned it should. The rancher rose once the plates were cleared and crossed to his desk. He opened the drawer he had opened before and taken nothing from. This time, he took the small box and carried it to the table. Evelyn's hands stilled. He set the box down and did not open it. "I told you I wouldn't ask while the ground was still moving," he said. "It's quieter now." She waited. "I don't have much patience for speeches," he went on. "And I won't bargain with fear." He opened the box. Inside lay a simple ring, the stone a clear blue that caught the lamplight without trying. "I won't promise ease," he said, "only work, and a place that keeps." He closed the box and slid it toward her. "One condition." She met his eyes. "Yes?" "Add laughter," he said, "when you can." She did not answer with words. She took the ring and slipped it on, then turned back to the stove and lifted the lid on the pot, letting steam and spice do the talking. The men laughed, relieved and easy, and the sound found its way into the beams. Later, when the house had settled and the last song had found its ending, the rancher pressed another gift into her hands. A small mirror, silvered and worn, initials scratched on the back by someone long gone. "For you," he said, "so you remember yourself." The doctor arrived with papers folded neat. "Temporary," he said, "but enough." The preacher nodded. "We'll make it right." Evelyn took the papers and tucked them into the locket the rancher handed her. A simple thing, empty and waiting. She placed the papers inside for now, a promise where a picture would one day rest. Snow deepened outside, softening edges. Inside, the stove held steady. Near midnight, when the baby slept and the lamps burned low, Evelyn stood by the window and watched the yard fill white. The rancher came to her side, close enough to share the glass. "You chose," he said. "I did," she said. It was the only confession she needed. He reached for her hand, not claiming, just present. She leaned into the warmth and felt the house settle around them, the way it did when it decided to keep a night. Outside, snow kept falling, patient as mercy. Inside, the table stood ready for the next meal. The curtains breathed, and the fire answered, steady, bright, and willing to last. As the fire settled low and the house breathed in its sleep, what remained was not the storm, nor the debt, nor even the danger that once stood at the door. What remained was a table that waited, a stove that stayed warm, and a promise kept through work rather than words. In the quiet that followed, the ranch did not become perfect. Fences still leaned, hands still ached in the morning, but there was coffee ready before dawn, laughter added where it mattered, and a child who slept without fear. In a land that often asked for more than it gave, that was no small miracle. These are the stories the West rarely writes down, stories of ordinary people choosing kindness when it costs them something, choosing faith when there are no guarantees, and choosing family even when the law lags behind the heart. They remind us that love is not always loud. Sometimes it is steady. Sometimes it is a light left burning through the night. If this story touched a memory, a hope, or a season of your own life, please let us know in the comments. We would be honored to hear from you. If you enjoyed this tale, give it a like, subscribe for more Western love stories, and share where you're watching from. Your presence here means more than you know.